And welcome back to the program. It's now 7:39 and time for us to take a look at what we should be expecting. We have got a climate summit happening next month here in Kenya, and a lot of preparation is going behind that. In as far as that is concerned, it's a big event that will be graced by some of the world leaders, hosted by President William Ruto. But right about now, I want us to take a look at this topic that is preceding that particular event that's coming next week. And on set I have got Jackline Koin, who is the Resilience Ambassador, Alliance for Science, with me in studio. Jackline, welcome to the program.
Thank you.
First of all, you were installed as an ambassador last week.
Yes.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
How does it feel to be in that docket right now, in that space?
Exciting, but also a challenge. A challenge in the face of the climate vagaries that farmers face, and the climate change issues around the world. And so for me, it is a challenge that I'm bracing up to take up. Yes.
So what does your day-to-day job entail? I'm looking at a situation where you're going to be the champion of proper management of our environment and about climate change in the country or globally speaking. It must be a hard task for you ahead.
Basically, it is connecting to farmers and relaying science that is available to farmers, mentoring farmers, and ensuring that they do conservation agriculture, basically, and lead communities towards sustainable agriculture, and helping them adapt to the climate changes, of course, that are occurring across the world now. Yes.
And the biggest people who've really suffered the impact of climate change and everything around it, globally speaking, are the farmers.
Yes, of course, the rural communities. Yes.
So how are they going to be benefiting from this particular conference coming up as we begin?
The Climate Summit is going to be an international conference that brings on board heads of states and the international community to dialogue, and we are expecting a lot of agreements and declarations. But as the Alliance for Science, we have come up with the Climate Action Zone.
Yes.
The Climate Action Zone is going to happen on the sidelines of the Climate Summit to bring local voices and farming communities and rural communities, local governments, to discuss and to bring their experiences and actually generate tentative solutions that they think are going to be helpful towards adaptation. And so really the Climate Action Zone is about listening to the voices of the local communities and the local farming communities.
What are some of the impacts of, challenges that we are facing as far as climate change is concerned, from your own overview?
I remember that in 2017 there was a devastating drought, and then it rained a little bit. In 2020, during the COVID pandemic, there was a bit of rain for the long rains. But during the short rains, from the short rains of 2020 to date, we have not received enough rains in Kenya. And so we are now talking about a 4-year-long drought. You have also heard meteorologists talk about El Nino.
Yes.
El Nino is a climate change issue. In today's newspapers, we saw news of locust invasion. It's a phenomenon of climate change. From the 4-year-long drought, we have experienced quite a bit in Kenya. One of them is poverty. There is an increase of poverty, particularly from the rural communities and particularly the farmers. Malnutrition is on the increase. The health experts have talked about increase in malnutrition. We have even experienced school dropouts, particularly from the pastoral communities. The pastoral communities migrate with their livestock, you know, to look for water and to look for pasture. And sometimes school children are involved in the movement, and so they move away from schools. When parents move away with the animals, they leave girls and women unattended, and sometimes even children remain alone in the homesteads. Particularly the girls do not go. And so pregnancies, you know, early pregnancies have been on the increase. And you have also seen, particularly in the north of Kenya, a lot of conflict, insecurity related to climate change, because communities fight over scarce resources in regard to pasture, in regard to water. And so we actually have, in Kenya, we have climate-related IDPs.
Yes.
You know, you have listened to stories around Baringo. You have listened to stories from Pokot, sometimes the northern frontier. And so all these are challenges that are related to climate. So climate is not just about food. It is not just about, it is not just about hunger. It goes all the way to education, to health, and including also security.
You know, you're talking about something that perhaps many people could not understand, that migration and conflict to sea, you know, for example, in the north part of Rift Valley, the conflict to sea is as a result of climate change.
Yes.
And so what's the government doing? I mean, Kenya is part of the signatory, and, you know, we signed so many international treaties with other international bodies, our international experts as well. But what are we doing in as far as this is concerned to mitigate the effects and impacts of climate change as a nation?
I think we have not been able to collect data to properly link the security issues that we have among the pastoral communities to climate change, because I believe it is majorly a result of climate issues.
But is it deliberate now that we don't have the data and the records to that?
Probably not, but sometimes it is an issue of diligence, and an issue of looking keenly at issues. And so I believe that if certain issues such as, you know, water, you know, access to water, access to pasture for livestock, will largely reduce the conflicts that we see in the north, including also theft. You know, some of it is from poverty. We see young people of the age, at the age of 14, of 12, the age of 18, being the ones that are armed, and they actually are the ones that steal the animals. So I do not believe that these are the people, because people talk about commercialization of cattle rustling, but those people are actually children. A lot of those people that are armed are actually children. Why are they not in school? Sometimes it is because of poverty. So how do they get to, you know, how do they get to roam around? And so the thinking of those people who have been observing this keenly is that it is partly from the drought. It is partly because their own families lost all their livestock to the vagaries of weather, and so then they are pushed to that situation. And so basically we are saying that if climate change issues can be mitigated, then this can reduce. Yes.
I'm looking at a situation where agriculture is the backbone of a country, and you know, the president is at the forefront in supporting the farmers. At the end of the day, when we talk about agriculture, we talk about science, and talk about green energy, we talk about climate change. So what are some of the challenges that, you know, as an entity, do we, or as a nation, do we face in our effort to combat climate change?
I'll tell you for a fact that we have organizations that have conducted a lot of good research. We have the Kenya Agricultural Livestock Research Organization. there's a lot of good information that can turn around the fortunes of agriculture in Kenya. We have a lot of universities that have done it in Kenya. Go to the University of Nairobi. All these universities have done very good research, but the linkage of this to the farming communities is the gap. You will find that our mothers in the village still cultivate the same old way. Conservation agriculture is not being practiced. Drought-tolerant seed are not getting to the villages as much as they should, particularly now that, farming practices should change towards adaptation. And so for me, as the ambassador, the way I look at it is the linkage of science to the farming communities. But also to say that as a country we are still far away from implementing the agreements that we have signed into. The Paris Agreement, for example, the SDGs. The SDGs talked about no poverty, zero hunger. We still largely witness hunger. SDG number 13 talked about climate action. We are still talking about logging. We are talking about use of charcoal. The rural communities are using firewood and charcoal, for fuel. They still a lot of over-harvesting of sand in the rural communities. And so they remove water from the riverbeds. And so I think we must relook at policy, and we must relook at implementation where policy is present.
Yeah.
Yes.
You've talked about of the SDGs, and we have got a timeline for us to get there. But how are mitigation against climate change aligned to that, the SDGs? The SDGs are very clear as it is, and governments have policy, but there has been weak linkage, or at least implementation, because if implementation was done, and I want to cite something. On the onset of devolution, I think mandates were divided. There was division of responsibility. There's that is with the national governments, and that got devolved. Among the ones that were devolved, I have not seen the devolved units deal with climate issues, or at least conservation, that keenly. And I have also seen that even in the national government departments, I have only seen the regional development authorities deal with conservation to a large extent. Probably also the Water Towers Agency. But the regional development authorities are the ones that are visible, are more proactive on the ground. But as it is, the regional development authorities do not exist in the current Kenyan constitution. So that leaves conservation unmanned in Kenya, because the NEMA is the police. Yes. Not an implementer. So really, there is a gap in regard to who is responsible for, environmental conservation and climate action in the Kenyan system as it is. It's a very simple. It's a very simple statement. But what's the answer? It's about you and I.
Yes.
Okay.
It's a you and I, and it's about linkages and coordination. And this is the coordination we are working around, to look at. And even to move towards assisting, including the RDS, the Regional Development Authorities, to be anchored within the law. So that once they are anchored within the law, then they can get support from government and from non-governmental actors, so that, water towers are taken care of, river basins are taken care of, plant cover is taken care of, and so on and so forth.
Yeah. Yes. When you talk about that, it boils down to our communities down there, because the civic education it's equally important. And you realize that certain government offices will only be visible in Nairobi, and when you go deep down to the local communities, their presence is quite not being felt. So how will you bridge that gap?
Before we go there, there used to be, when we were growing up, there used to be extension officers.
Very good.
That
Does it still exist?
These agricultural extension officers,
yes,
you know, were always within communities and training communities.
And there are people who knew every corner of the communities.
And this particular one collapsed on the onset of devolution. I think it was majorly donor funded. And then when devolution came in, there was a bit of a lapse. I know now they are, you know, working around it to try to make it work.
Yeah.
In different ways, they have tried to make it work. So this is really now our role, to make sure that information flow. And so I am sure now you have seen where the gap is in regard to the information flow from the institutions to the farming communities. So really training of farmers is what collapsed, and this is what we are focusing on, you know, relaying the information to the farming communities. Yes.
Am I qualified to be an extension officer in my local village?
No, you are not.
Okay.
You have to be an agricultural expert.
Okay. When I look at the second page of the Star newspaper, El Nino rains will begin in October. This, according to the experts, and Madam Jackline, let me just get to here. They say that the current condition will mirror what happened in 1997, with destructions happened. For us who can remember what really happened in 1997, the El Nino. There's been a cycle since then until now. The effect of global warming is here with us. The effect of climate change is here with us. The president has been pushing each and every corner, the governors, the senators, the legislators, and even you, action players, to plant more trees. But we are looking at a situation that El Nino is here with us starting next month. Does this really worry you?
Yes, it worries me if people are not prepared. But in the event that people are prepared, it's an opportunity. It's an opportunity to collect stormwater. It's an opportunity to do enough water pans, you know, to hold, you know, runoff water. And an opportunity basically just to prepare. And I know that a number of county governments have done legislation in regard to water collection, and I have seen some that have passed legislation to the effect that every building has to have, you know, water, you know, collection. If this has happened over time, and if many people have considered and done this, then we will not be worried. But we will be worried if we will sit around and wait for this water to drain off. Of course, if we do not have enough bridges, you will expect that people will be carried away. Probably if bridges are not well done. We also have the fear that, you know, from the long drought, that rangelands have lost quite a bit of seed, pasture seed. And so when the floods sweep off, then probably we will lose a lot of you know, pasture seed from the ground. And so probably then, but in preparation, we should have, you know, pasture seed for rangelands. Farmers actually should then rethink about which crops, you know, to plant, because we have crops that easily get destroyed by water. But also to do, you know, furrows and ensure that this expected rain does not, you know, create that amount of damage.
The issue of El Nino is about global warming, but how do we contribute to that? Because at the end of the day, it's our contribution as human beings. How have we contributed to that?
Logging. You have heard that. And I need to thank the High Court for, you know, taking back the lift on the ban on logging. Probably the president meant it well, but it did not come out well, because I think we are a destructive community as a country. And every little leeway, we move into, you know, ravage the environment. And so we thank the courts for having restored our forests and, you know, to stop the logging. But we also thank the government for the 10, how many trees were those? You know, the expected number of trees that, yes. You know. I have seen quite a bit of effort through the Ministry of Environment in planting of trees. But the issue should not be planting of trees. The issue should be growing of trees, because planting a tree is different from growing a tree. And if all of us can focus on growing of the trees, particularly the schools, the institutions, and individual farmers, yeah. If they can focus on growing of the trees, then I am sure we can achieve the presidential target. Yes.
You talked about farming, and perhaps this is quite close to your heart.
Yes.
And food security, again, in the manifesto of the Kenya Kwanza manifesto is about food security. So the process of saving our community, saving our environment, mitigating the effects of climate change, how are we coming up with some creative ways to bring up either agriculture, in as far as much as we are going to have the effects of food security being sorted out, but again, on the other hand, the issue of climate change and saving our community and environment is also taken care of.
I've seen a number of innovations. Lately, we see, you know, I think Kenya is one of those countries that have 95% access to the internet. And quite a big number of our youth have access to internet. And I have seen innovation around, you know, getting markets for produce. Yeah. Farmers face losses all the way from production to markets. And I have seen innovation around access to markets through the internet. If we can move towards that direction, and I have also seen innovation towards, you know, soil testing, you know, and also extension through the internet. I have seen WhatsApp groups being created on specific value chains, and I see groups of lead farmers, you know, coming together and informing themselves and comparing notes and helping each other. I think this is the direction we want to go. Yeah. And I have seen, you know, groups that are serious enough to get rid of anybody that, you know, is not practicing what they say. And this is the direction we want to go, and we know we can better that, you know, bring in technology into, you know, food production and the systems and value chains from end to end.
Absolutely.
Yes.
Let's take a break. When you come back, we have a new curriculum here, CBC. How are you entrenching this? Or are you planning to put that in part of CBC so that the future generation, starting from early stages of their formation until they become big people, they have the effect, and they know very well that climate change and conserving of our environment is something that we need to be taken care of. All right, let's take a break. We'll be right back with more with Jackline Koin. Stay with us. Welcome back. We're still talking about matters climate change, and with me is Honorable Jackline Koin, who is the Resilience Ambassador, Alliance for Science. Alliance for Science. Some of us took humanities and languages, that's where we are here. So let's talk about the issue of how we can incorporate gender in our effort to combat the issues of you know, adaptation, mitigation, and just having the measures put together in the fight against climate change.
I think it's just about focusing on women and youth in conservation and in agriculture. Basically because in the African setting, every day men walk out of the homestead to go and look for, you know, money. But it is the women who are left in the homestead, you know, to tend to the trees at home, to take care of the animals at home. Is it the chicken? Is it the cow? And everything else around the home. And therefore, the focus should actually be on the women and the youth, because these are the people who spend most of their time in the homestead.
Yeah.
And so it is extension, and it is focus, and it is capacity building and trainings that are focused on women as the custodians and caretakers of the homes. So basically, that is the direction. Yeah.
What is the uptake in our communities when you use gender approach? What is the response like?
Women are very good learners. They
What about men?
I will tell you that if you look at, for example, the chama system in Kenya, you know, women are the inventors of the chama system in Kenya, and the chamas have helped women learn quite a bit. Some of them are based on agricultural practices, some of them are table banking, some of them are, you know, sometimes socio-economic. And through that, they become recipients to new knowledge. The reason why men will not be very good in receiving information is that, you know, they do not walk in parks. Each person, you know, takes his own journey. I don't know where they meet. Probably later in the evenings they do, but I'm not sure that the environment is good for, you know, for trainings and learnings. And so this is the reason why we say that women are better learners, you know, than men.
We are also better learners. We are good learners. I have to support the boy child. We are good learners. But anyway,
probably if we focus on the youth,
it's easy to mobilize women easily, the same way you're saying that chamas, they can come up with chamas and unite pretty fast.
Yes.
To some extent, I think men, we have got so much to do. We have got a lot of things running through our minds.
Agreed,
so, yeah.
agreed.
So bringing us together and sitting us together. And
but youth have done a pretty good job at, you know, coming together and caucusing around ideas and, you know, innovations. And so, yes, I think the youth are representing the boy child well.
When you talk about now gender and the youth, I ask you a question on how this can be entrenched in our education system.
Yes. So
that moving forward, it doesn't get us flat-footed in our, you know, formative, in our in future generations, so to speak, that it is completely instilled in a child's formative stage from kindergarten. You know, you have to take care of environment. This is the effect if you don't take care of it. Are you trying, or what are you trying to do so that you can also entrench this in our education system?
One of the advantages of the CBC is that it's very practical in nature. The old system had become theory, and it had become exam-oriented. But CBC is good because it is very practical-oriented. The only fear has been whether the parents are going to keep up with the expenses of you know, the practicals. And so getting to support and improve policy around, you know, climate action around it is not difficult. And so we are looking at partnership with the Ministry of Education to see how it is that we can entrench climate action and adaptation within the topics within the curriculum. Yes.
You know, with climate change, it's quite unpredictable. It's nature. But then as a nation, what are we doing to combat or just trying to work on the issue of potential human displacement as far as this is concerned? Because you talked about nomadism, people moving from one place to another and what have you. But that is human displacement because of climate change. How are we doing that, combating that?
Unfortunately, that becomes an activity around relief. And as Alliance for Science, we talk about the shift from relief to resilience. And so the activities therein, you know, the conservation issues, you know, ensuring that if as little rain as we get, you know, is absorbed inside the soil and it does not run off. you know, some of those interventions is what we are talking about, so that we can, you know, reduce, you know, the effects of climate change. And so really the interventions is really what we insist on, so that then the issues of relief can reduce. Yeah.
In some of these areas that we already have human displacement, are there some of the mitigation factors that has been put in place to reclaim these places that are now, quote unquote, left bare because of the effect?
Yeah, we have quite a number of organizations that are working with government, including, you know, the World Bank, including government and non-governmental agencies, you know, to rehabilitate rangelands and to improve the quality of soils. And I believe that if this is done consistently over time, then we are going to really take back, you know, the devastation, the environmental devastation witnessed from the climate issues. Yeah. Again,
Madam Jackline, when I was looking at the papers here, there's another story here that Kenya risk of another desert locust invasion. When we had the desert locust invasion, government spent millions of shillings just to mitigate this and to bring us close to this. But now there's another cycle. We are talking about the issue of climate change. We are talking about the issue of food security. And when you have this, as an Alliance for Science, are you also focused on seeing something from this desert invasion? And how can it be mitigated?
I think the discussion should be with the regional desert locust control. You know, there's an organization that is mandated to, you know, control desert locusts in the region, in East and Central Africa. And so the discussion should be with them, because usually desert locusts are controlled from incubation. If they are not controlled from incubation, then they move. And then they begin, you know, it spreads, because everywhere they land, you know, they leave eggs. And so the discussion should be with the regional body to see what it is they are doing in regard to controlling from incubation, because usually it happens up north at around Sudan or Somalia there, so that then you know, control can be done. But I must say that organizations such as FAO have done a good job at supporting the regional organization, and even interventions when this happens. And so ours is to partner with the organizations that are, you know, making interventions to ensure that this does not come to devastate the farmers once more.
In your efforts to save our society and the environment, what are some of the obstacles that you face in an effort to, you know, bring some of the measures in adaptation of the climate change to save our community? What are some of the obstacles that you face, or as a nation?
One is that our people have, I don't know whether it is being Kenyan to look for money through whichever means. Because
that is us. There's nothing you can do about it. That is us.
And that attitude in itself is one of the biggest obstacles that there are towards, you know, conservation and climate adaptation. Because we will burn charcoal to make money. We will cut down a tree to sell firewood. We will overharvest sand, you know, to make money, and without, you know, making consideration of the long-term effects for this. So some of those, you know, attitudes and behavior is the biggest challenge towards addressing this. And so we will be looking at ways of communicating this, and policy interventions and implementation, and including enforcement to ensure that the environment is not destroyed.
You know, you've talked about behavior and attitude. How do we change this? Because as you said, Kenyans, the moment you give them a small leeway, that's it.
You could see how they took advantage of the president's pronouncement.
Everybody
it's like they were told to pick pangas.
Yes.
They took all the power source and went into the forest. And so that's the greatest challenge in Kenya. We are yet to see what happens in the rest of the global south. But in Kenya, I think it's about the attitude. But it boils down to enforcement of policy.
Yeah.
If one day the government organizations, bestowed upon implementation of policies, take it up seriously, so that, it is deterrent enough, then I am sure that people will keep away from our environment. Yes.
Okay. Generally, where does Kenya stand in the global map in our effort to save our environment, come up with measures in bringing back our environment the way it used to be, the effect of climate change, how we can reverse it? Where is Kenya standing in the global arena?
We will not brag that we are doing well. We may not be doing well. We have a number of, particularly just East African countries, that are doing much better than Kenya. In certain, even East African countries, you will see, things like tree planting deeply entrenched in communities, and you will see them do well. But I would also like to comment counties such as probably Kitui County. Kitui County in the recent past was known to be extremely arid. But now, when you go to Kitui, farmers have, made efforts towards tree planting. And now you drive there, you will not realize that you are in the old Kitui. And so I know of, efforts that have been done towards, conservation, but we still have a long way to go. Yeah. Yes.
Yeah, that calls
and we need to congratulate those, local governments and the county governments and the organizations and communities that are doing something towards, conservation. And I'm talking about Kitui because I visited Kitui 2 months ago, and I found a farmer who has goats. And I found that farmer bandaging his trees so that goats do not nib into, the tree cover.
The tree cover, yes.
And that, I thought that was wonderful. Because how many of us think about the tree? Yeah. You only think about your goat probably because you will sell it off and make some money, or probably you milk it and make and drink the milk. But I saw farmers who, had, this care for the trees, such care that you'd find a bandaged tree. And so I know that there are communities that are doing quite a bit, but we still have a long way to go.
Yeah, we have a long way to go. That calls for public awareness.
Yes.
How much of this are we doing?
Bits and pieces of efforts have been done, but we need to consolidate the partnerships and the efforts and to move forward. Yeah.
What are the partners? What are some of the partners that we have currently?
Quite a number of partners. The Alliance for Science is one of them. FAO, quite a bit. UNEP, quite a number of international communities are in it. But the partnerships have not been solidified and probably, so that there are synergies and to reduce duplications within communities.
We are a political nation. Allow me to bring climate change in a bit of some politics in it.
Yes.
Do we need to include legislators and even have some of the policies presented before the National Assembly, enacted to push and to have some of these things anchored in law in the fight against climate change, on how we can improve our environment, and even how can we include politicians in the fight against climate change?
It's absolutely important, very, very important, because legislators being lawmakers, we need them on our side. We need for them to actually see it as it is. and so that then they can be able to pass the right policies. But also it doesn't end there. Sometimes we have the best policies, but when it comes to implementation, then that's where the rain beats us.
Yeah.
So I think it's both ways. But the legislators also have a role in regard to, oversight. So we still can use them after, coming up with the proper policies. Then we can use them in oversight to ensure that our environment is protected.
Okay, the Africa Climate Week is soon approaching.
Yes.
And I'm also told that the Alliance will be hosting the Climate Action Zone at the Radisson Blu on the sidelines of the climate change. So what should you expect, or what should we look forward to on that particular day?
We will look forward to a discussion on climate and security, climate justice. We will also be talking about relief to resilience, but this primarily will be about listening to the community voices, listening to the farmer communities, the local voices, so that we do not have an international conference where, the local voices have not been taken into consideration. So the Climate Action Zone is actually a sideline event for the Climate Action Summit.
Yeah. Am I welcomed?
You're quite welcome, and all Kenyans are welcome. We actually have a website for the Climate Action Zone, and everybody is invited to register.
It's free?
Yes.
Registration is free?
Yes.
Okay. All right. Thank you so much. That is Jackline Koin, who is the ambassador, and we wish you all the best in your next assignment as the ambassador for Alliance for Science. Of course, we've been talking about matters climate change and what we can do as a nation in our effort to conserve our environment, also just to spread our wings and have the adaptations of climate change taken care of as a nation, much as we are also part of the environment. What are you doing? What are you doing? By the way, are you planting trees?
A lot of them.
A lot of them. What's the progress? You're doing well.
I have done 2,000. In my farm, I have done 2,000 in the last 2 years.
Okay.
And they have grown. The shortest is my height.
Very nice. Okay. Good one. Thank you so much. Okay. Asante sana. That was Jackline Koin. Let's take a break. We'll be having more discussion.